clicked live right now. Looks like things are moving so much faster too. So I think we might be good here.
Okay. Trying to figure out on our thing here on Facebook. I don't even see it on the page, so it must not even be on there.
I think it is now.
Okay.
All right. I know we got Mike Maple watching us, looks like. Give everybody just a second here to try to join us. It's our third go around of this morning, right, guys? But I think everything is working right now. At least it appears to be. Mike Maple says we're coming over loud and clear. That's good to hear, Mike. All right. Well, listen, for those of you that are watching, looks like Mike and Olivia so far. Others will be joining us. But this morning we have Ethan and Ashley Batschelet, World Gospel Missionaries in Honduras. And but before we jump in and talk with them this morning, I just want to let those of you that are watching and that will watch later, we have already done 2 of these Mission Hour Missionary Month interviews. Last week, we sat down with the Tejedas and the Williams. And then this Thursday, we'll be meeting with Nathaniel and Nicole Summers on the Texas-Mexico border with World Gospel. The following week, with the Cubas in Japan and the Louders in Kentucky within Faith. And then the following week, our very last and final week of our missionary month, will be with the Berkeys in Arizona. And then Sarah and I will be interviewed by Jonathan King, our camp board president, to finish us out. So with that, we want to first just welcome you guys. Thanks, Ethan and Ashley, for sitting down with us this morning.
No problem. We're glad to be here.
All right. Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to invite others that are watching the opportunity to submit questions, so they can do that. They can send it to Brett at MountHopeBibleCamp.com. So it's Brett, BRETT, at Mount, just MT, HopeBibleCamp.com. Or obviously you guys can put them in the comments of this Facebook Live, and I'll be able to pass that along to Ethan and Ashley as well. All right. So with that, guys, let's just jump right into some questions. And how we've started off with everyone else so far, and probably how we'll continue, is just giving you an opportunity to share about your personal testimony, when you decided to follow Jesus. And so you guys can kind of bounce off each other. If you want, one of you want to start and then the other, but let's just start there in sharing your personal testimony.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, I grew up in a Christian home and accepted the Lord when I was about 5 years old, and was baptized by my father when I was 11. He's a pastor. I don't necessarily have a specific moment in my life where I can remember thinking like that's the moment that I knew I would become a missionary. It was just sort of a very gradual thing, but for almost as long as I can remember, I knew that's what I would end up doing someday.
I think for me, we both actually grew up. Her dad and my uncle were pastors in the same small conference of churches in Iowa, Minnesota, and we didn't know it until we met in our late 20s. We never knew that, and we found out later that my uncle and her dad had been good friends for years. And
we might have met each other when we were about 5 years old in some
nursery, who knows. But I grew up on our family farm in Northwest Iowa, very rural setting. Went to school out there. Also grew up in a Christian family. I accepted the Lord in Awana clubs as a 7-year-old. I remember I was pretty little. Maybe, I don't know if I fully understood it at that point. Probably not. Probably became clearer as I got older, but had a lot of great people in my life influencing that. And then grew up in that setting, and then eventually joined our high school, I guess I would have joined youth group in middle school in our home church. And our home church had an annual mission trip to Mexico every year for the youth group. And I remember usually it was reserved only for high schoolers, but my dad volunteered as a leader for the group. And with him as a leader, they let me go along as an 8th grader. So I remember I went along on my first mission trip as an 8th grader to Mexico. And then I went every year after that. And then by the time I think by the time that ended, I remember I still wanted to be involved in missions, but I was going to age out of this program. And so then I signed up with a ministry out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota called Life Light. And they were taking a mission trip to an orphanage in Haiti. And so then I went down there, and it was while I was in Haiti that the Lord really got me to that place where I accepted the fact that I was going to be a missionary, or that was his call for my life. It was while I was there. That was the summer between high school and college. I remember being somewhat confused because I came home from Haiti thinking that I would always be there. And when I got to college, actually the doors in that ministry kind of shut. It was the first time I'd experienced that in my life, that something didn't really just flow just as I thought it would. And so in that moment, I had to accept that I was going to be a missionary, but maybe not there. And so the Lord shut the doors there. And then I found World Gospel Mission, and I applied for the volunteer program, and I actually had applied to go to 2 different fields in Africa. And I think I put as my third choice, Argentina, maybe in South America, but Honduras and where I actually ended up going were not anywhere on the list. They weren't even, they weren't anywhere near what I was thinking. And anyway, all those fields said that I could go. But when the mission contacted me to tell me that those fields are open, they gave me a different surprise. And we actually ended up I was single at that time, going to Grenada in the Caribbean. They said it was a field with one missionary couple, and they had been looking for volunteers to come and serve there with them. So I went to Grenada, prayed about it, and the Lord directed me in that direction. So I didn't go to any of the fields I thought maybe were going to be options. And then that field, actually the night before I flew in, it said they contacted me and said that they had made the decision. Actually, they had felt called to go home to the U.S. to be pastors. And so halfway through my term, I went to Grenada to help them more or less shut down the field and then leave halfway through my term. And I had the money raised. And so the mission was trying to help me figure out where I was going to go. And Honduras sort of raised their hand. So this is where I ended up. It wasn't at all on my radar, even a little bit. So that's what happened.
So let me ask you 2 questions about that. As you were speaking, Ethan, I just kind of thought, man, I need to follow up with this question. First of all, how important do you think that mission trip to Mexico, that initial trip, or the years following, how important do you think that was to where you are now?
Well, that was everything. I think I don't know. I mean, the Lord, if he wants you in missions, he's going to take you there no matter what it takes. But honestly, in my particular walk, that was critical. That trip opened my first trip in 8th grade. I remember everything about it, the excitement of it. You know, not even just, I mean, it was going down and serving, and that was exciting, but I'd never, you know, I'd grown up in a very, very rural spot in Iowa. I'd never been on an airplane. I'd never really done like outside of the country travel. I'd never had a passport. And even that year, I didn't have one because you didn't need one to get into Mexico at that time. But I remember getting on the plane and just thinking everything, and getting down there and realizing that, you know, my whole life as a kid, you grow up with your parents or wherever you're growing up with, and they serve you, or they help you, or they teach you and do all that stuff. It was my first chance to be able to actually teach someone else. And that's when I started being interested in working in children's ministry. And that's somewhat shifted now, but that was the original call. But without those trips, I mean, my trajectory would have been very different. That pretty much did it all for me. I mean, I graduated high school, like I mentioned, and I sort of aged out of that program, but I asked them if I could keep going back to Mexico as a college student, because at that point, after 1 year of college, maybe 2 years of college had passed, I asked if I could go back with them, this time as a translator, because at that time I'd been coming down here to Honduras in the summers between my college years, and Spanish was really growing. So then they allowed me to go back as a translator, and I went 2 or 3 more times as a leader in the group. But that really, really changed everything for me. Honestly, it was a huge thing.
It's really cool that you say that, because that was Justin and Debbie on Thursday. That was almost the exact same. They went on a short-term trip that just sparked a love for missions that ended up being their career.
Yeah.
So that's cool. That's cool to hear. Now, I got one more question with that. Is you thought you were going to Africa or some other place, and then I'm thinking about, just as you're talking, like the willingness that you would have to have, or maybe it was just like, I don't know. What was going through your mind when you thought this and then you ended up with this? And what kind of attitude do you think a missionary needs to have when things get shifted like that?
Mhm. I remember the mission when they contacted me the first time about going to Grenada instead of the fields I had listed. They were very open. They told me they weren't going to make me do it. They said they'd talk to the fields in Africa, and they had agreed that I could go as a volunteer to either of them. I'm pretty sure. I know Kenya was one, and then I forgetting which other. Uganda. I think that's where I applied to be a volunteer. And I remember they said that was fine, that those options would work. But then when they brought up this specific opportunity, and then they explained to me a little more about exactly what I'd be doing in Grenada, it really piqued my interest. At the time, I thought, working with children and different ministries that way, they had said that there was it wasn't completely state-run, but it was part nonprofit, part state-run children's home in Grenada that they wanted to partner with. It wasn't a WGM project. They just wanted to see if we could get a volunteer that would go there and maybe build a partnership with that home. And I did that, and they allowed me to be a volunteer staff member at the children's home. And that was kind of right what I was looking for at the time, or the experience. In Haiti, I'd worked at an orphanage, and so I'd kind of wanted to stick somewhat similar to that. And while the children I worked with were not orphans, they were actually kids who'd been rescued from dangerous situations at home. But they lived at this large home, and it was great. Honestly, flexibility is key. I mean, I don't honestly know. Missions wouldn't be easy if you're not flexible at all. I think the biggest moment was when I was excited and building up and getting ready to go to Grenada, and then they told me that it was only going to last half as long as I thought, and that I'd be switching to a field that we had no idea what it would be yet. There were people in the mission office, they told me, figuring out where I was going to be able to go if I wanted to. And they told me I had funds left for half of my time, and I could choose. I could go back to the US, I could go home, or I could go and volunteer in the main office, or they could find a country closer by to where I was in Grenada that would fit in my budget, and I could go and finish my time there. And I wanted to get the overseas missions experience, and that's when my flexibility was really tested. It was hard getting to Grenada and watching a field shut down and the furniture in my apartment slowly being sold off. And I'm excited to get there, and they're moving on to something else. And that was totally understandable. They're still great folks. We saw the missionaries I worked with down there. We saw them on our last HMA in the US at a camp in Georgia. And it was fantastic to see them. And they're pastoring a church in Georgia still 10 years later, in the same place they went at that time. And they're great folks. And it had nothing to do with them. The Lord was changing their call, and I wasn't frustrated with them at all. I really wanted to stay, but I went to Honduras. I accepted. The mission said, "Okay, would you want to go to Honduras as an option?" And I said, "I suppose." And they said, "You'll be in Tegucigalpa, Honduras." And I'd only ever heard, the name Tegucigalpa maybe a couple times in social studies and laughing at it because it sounded funny, that kind of thing. I never really thought that I would ever be there or call it home, but I went there. And I remember my first week, I tell people, just blatantly honest, I didn't have a great attitude. I got to Tegucigalpa, and my flexibility had been pushed to the limits, and I stayed at the guest house in Tegucigalpa for almost a week, and I just was really frustrated and didn't like what was going on. But within the 6 weeks that I was there, before the 6 weeks had ended, I had reapplied to come back the next summer. So the Lord moved really quickly in my heart that summer.
Very good. Very good.
Flexibility is key.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Uh-huh.
That's very, very true. Okay,
Mhm.
so let me shift gears a little bit. So when you first came, Ethan, to Mount Hope, you were by yourself.
Mhm.
And then the second time you showed up, you have Ashley by your side. So
Right. Yeah.
fill us in. Tell us how did that happen? And Ashley, what's been your perspective joining Ethan down in Honduras?
Well, the story of how we met is quite interesting. I had been teaching in a small town in rural Minnesota. It was less than 300 people. So that's the job I got right out of college. And I was working on just getting more teaching experience in my own language and culture before I went somewhere else. And I had started looking online for different missions organizations and schools that I could go to teach in. And I actually found World Gospel Mission and El Salvador here online on my own. I wasn't sure and was still looking around, but it definitely seemed like a good option. And then one Sunday, Ethan showed up at my church to give his talk. And it's kind of random. There's a gentleman in my church named Robert who had come down here on a missions team and just happened to run into Ethan in the office building, which Ethan didn't really spend much time in at the time.
No, I don't remember why I was there that day, but I ran into Robert.
It was really a chance meeting. And then they got talking, and this guy invited Ethan to speak at my church. So he shows up at my church one day and is up front talking about, oh, thanks for having me here and for inviting me. And I'm really glad my grandmother could come with me today because I'm single and usually have to travel by myself. And when he said he was single, people like turned around in their pews and looked at me, literally, because I don't know if all of them knew I wanted to be a missionary, but I'm sure some of them did. And I was around that age and also single. And so I went out of my way to avoid talking to him after church that day. He came back about 6 months later to help out with the VBS, and I also went out of my way to avoid talking to him because it was just super awkward. I don't know how much longer after that it was like a year later.
It was a year, it was exactly a year after the VBS that I had come back to Honduras, and then I was actually it was like exactly a year later in the summer. I'd gone back to Honduras, spent 6 months in ministry. Then I went to Mexico to visit some missionary friends there. And it was while I was in Mexico, I was talking to this couple, the same place where I went in high school. I was back there visiting that couple. They're from Mexico. This couple, they were born and raised there. They went to the U.S. and they became citizens of the U.S. and they raised their kids in the U.S. Then went back to their home area in Mexico to be missionaries after they become Christians. And anyway, I went back to visit them. And they asked me if I was dating anyone or if I was, talking to anyone. And in most Latin cultures, it's unusual to be at the age I was at that time and not be at least dating somebody or at least be interested in somebody. I said, not really. I said, there was this random pastor from Minnesota who sent me a message telling me he had to introduce me to this young lady in his church.
Which I didn't know about.
Yeah,
I did not know about this email.
So we had no idea she had no idea that this was happening. And I had sort of set his email aside. I hadn't actually, because when you're a single missionary on HMA, everyone has an option for you. Everyone wants to set you up with everybody. And so it's, I just sort of took those opportunities and set them aside. And I told them, I said, no, I wasn't dating anyone. And there was this one email I'd gotten from a pastor, and they said, well, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you check it out? And so then I found Ashley on Facebook because the minister at that church had given me her name on Facebook. So I found her on Facebook, and then I sent her a message.
And imagine my surprise when I opened Facebook one day to see a message from this guy that my entire church was convinced I was going to marry someday, that I had gone out of my way to avoid twice. And all of a sudden he's talking to me on Facebook a year later. But we started talking, and then now here we are.
It must have worked. I must have given just this most incredible presentation at church, though, because later her mother admits to me that the only thing she had on her fridge living in that house was my prayer card all that time. And so it must have really I must be like the best speaker or something, because it was like worked out perfect. But that's
how the best conversation ever. I love it.
And we just sat there, and I remember thinking, well, because we both had arrived at a place in our lives. I mean, I had moved to El Salvador by that time. Right when we started speaking, actually, when I came back to Honduras from Mexico is when I moved into El Salvador from Tegucigalpa. So when we found out later that she had been investigating El Salvador online already, I hadn't been living here yet when she was doing that. And it just so happened that that's the school she was looking up. And I moved out here, and we kept talking, and then she came. This was in the summer. Well, we started talking the summer of 2015.
And I came down in summer of 2016 for a missions trip. I had been to Guatemala a couple of years before for a summer-long trip, and I knew that based off of that trip that I was supposed to be a missionary someday, but Guatemala wasn't quite exactly the right place. I thought it would probably be a Latin culture, so it was close, but not quite. And so I came down for that summer of 2016, and that's when we got engaged.
Yep. I bought the ring after the second date. That sounds crazy, but I actually met her. Awesome. My grandmother, who had gone with me to visit her church when I was first there, was a huge part of my life growing up. And she's actually gone now, but she's since passed away. But at that time, she was very sick in December of 2015. So my parents helped me go home to be able to spend that month with her. And then we took advantage of that opportunity and met in person. And
After already about
that,
6 months of talking.
Yeah, we'd been talking pretty heavily for 6 months. Like we'd been messaging every day, constant, pretty much. When we got married or when we got engaged, what was it? She printed off every message we'd ever sent each other from the beginning, and it was like a book, like a thing like that thick. It was just huge. And so we kept those messages. It was kind of fun. And then after the second in-person date, I went and I told my parents I needed a loan because I needed to buy a ring, and then I was going to bring it with me to Honduras. She had been talking about coming down as a volunteer. I knew I wasn't going to propose until she had been here and really felt like the Lord was calling her to this country, because at that point my calling was, well, it still is, just really strong, and I knew the Lord probably wasn't going to, and she needed to feel that calling for herself. It wasn't something I could just say, you need to do this. And so she came as a volunteer, and when we knew, I proposed in Tegucigalpa that summer, and that's when we got engaged.
That's awesome.
Long story, but that's how it goes.
No, it's a great story. I love it. I guarantee those that are listening and watching are just loving this. Okay, but let me shift gears a little bit. Let me ask this question, because I really think this is a really important question for anybody that's listening that may be considering missions. What advice would you give someone that kind of maybe just feels that God may be leading them to become a missionary? What advice might you offer them as they're considering this?
I think it's good to go on a shorter trip first, and you can go on a shorter trip with a work team, but to get a feeling of what more it's really like, it's good to go for a little bit longer and more by yourself, maybe with 1 or 2 other people, because on work teams, you get to come see the country and you get to work on a project and such, but there's a lot that you don't get to see and don't do and don't experience. And so I'd recommend going to whatever country you're considering for a little bit longer first, at least a month or longer if you can.
Yeah, I'd say in my mind, the first thing that pops into my head is if the Lord's given you an interest in it, or if he's opened your eyes to the possibility of missions, the first thing I would say is don't close your eyes. Mm-hmm. Don't give up on that. That can be the first thing. That's the first thing that I feel like, if you have an interest in missions, well, of course, down here, everyone refers to, we say the enemy, but he can go, if he knows that somebody's interested and in missions, he doesn't want you to be a missionary. And so he's instantly going to take away your interest, or at least try. Mm-hmm. And so don't lose that interest and hold on to it, because right in the beginning, it's hardest to hold on to it. And so if you got the passion for it, or you're interested in it, like Ashley was saying, come on a work team, or, if you're college aged or beyond, WGM has our volunteer program. Mm-hmm. I was a volunteer 3 times before I became a missionary with WGM, and Ashley was once, and most, actually, I think everyone except for maybe a couple of missionaries with WGM in Honduras were once volunteers. Mm-hmm. And so that's how a lot of us start. And it's a great way, like Ashley said, to come down, travel on your own. You step out of your comfort zone a little more, especially being by yourself, and you go to a ministry here at El Sembrador. We're biased, so we'll ask any volunteer to come to Honduras and come to El Sembrador, because we're set up for volunteers here. But there's awesome ministries with WGM all over the world that the volunteer program is fantastic. It really helped me get a feel for what it was like to be a full-time missionary, because you have to raise your own funds. You have to look at a budget and help the mission see, okay, this is what the different costs are and what's involved and things we might not have thought about before. And WGM really takes good care of you. It's really, honestly, of any volunteer program I did, it was just probably the best. I'd gone with other organizations or different groups before, and this was by far, they take care of you, and you feel like part of the family, even as the new person. And so that was great. And so, yeah, that would be my our advice. Don't, first off, if you're interested, don't give up on that interest, and then look for an opportunity to go a short time first to really see. We're grateful that we had that opportunity. Mm-hmm. You might go for a month or 2 months and realize that maybe the Lord's calling you to serve him, but in the U.S. or maybe through a different type of ministry, or you might find, yes, I'm definitely meant to be a missionary and I want to be here or there, or God will slowly make things slowly or quickly, make things very clear to you if you jump in and get your feet wet first and then see.
Yeah, I love that. I wrote down these words: don't close your eyes.
Yes.
I thought that was fantastic. Yeah, that's really great advice. Don't close your eyes to the opportunities in front of you. That's fantastic. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about what you guys do in Honduras. So I'm going to kind of just leave it open, but just kind of walk us through like what ministry looks like for you all. You might even share a little bit about what ministry looks like now as opposed to what it typically looks like. I'm sure the COVID-19 pandemic has changed things up for you a little bit. And feel free to share any stories that may kind of help us understand what you guys do.
Well, during a normal school year, we both do several different things. We're not involved in just any one area. I teach preschool in the mornings, and then I also teach elementary music classes. El Sembrador is several things. It's a farm, and then it's a middle school, high school, and now we're opening an elementary school, 1 grade at a time. This year we opened 3rd grade. So I do that in the mornings or maybe early afternoons. And then the rest of the day, it kind of depends on which day it is, I guess. I do different tutoring classes with kids. Ethan's the campus pastor, and so I also do some stuff with that, different ladies that come to chat, or the residential kids, I bake cupcakes for them on their birthdays, or a lot of cookies, 500 plus cookies on move-in days and move-out days for all of them, which is quite the long process. And then, well, I guess Ethan can talk about what he does.
I think I wouldn't underestimate that either. She talks about baking as part of her ministry, but really it is, I mean, she bakes a lot. I mean, she bakes for all of my meetings with the farm workers, bakes for all the students all throughout the year. It's a lot of baking. Our oven gets a lot of mileage, but it's
actually, I've started to wear out the oven.
Yeah, we have to look for a different oven.
Yeah, our stove still works just fine, but the oven kind of starts not working so good once it's been turned on for a couple hours. So.
Yeah. Baking is a big thing here. Even in normal times during the year, El Sembrador is right next door is a little village, and we get lots of people there come asking. She bakes cakes for them and their families for different things. And so baking has been a unique way for us to reach out to people, not even just at El Sembrador, but in different communities.
And even now with this current situation, the kids aren't here, and so I don't do baking for them as much, but we just had Mother's Day, and that's a huge holiday here. We normally have events, huge events in the churches, huge events in the schools. The families will do a big thing. And right now that's not really possible. And so I had a couple families come and ask if I would bake them cakes for their Mother's Day celebration. And so we still did that. And Ethan's still able to do devotionals with the farm employees, just in a slightly different format. And so I still try and do some baking for that. And now with our current situation too, like I said, I normally teach preschool and elementary music. I also help with the marching band. Now we probably, I don't know that we're gonna really have much of a marching band season, but this year. I do still do preschool classes. I send activities once a week with a long list of activities for parents to do with their kids at home, and I try and do video classes with my preschoolers too, once a day for about an hour, which is interesting because they're 3 and 4 years old, and it's a little hard to do that over a video, but we try. And then I also still do some one-on-one tutoring here with different employees' kids that live on campus.
And the tutoring's been continuing even now during COVID because we just do that on the front patio here in front of our house, and she's got a schedule set up with different kids, and that works out. And during normal times. This last year, 2019, was my first year as campus pastor here at El Sembrador. And then actually just a few months ago, I was ordained with the denomination WGM partners with here in Honduras. And that's been sort of a call that I've had on my heart for a long time, missionary, but also pastoral work. I really, now that I've told Ashley before, I felt my life, I started out as all children's ministry, and that was my thing. But as I've slowly gotten older, my heart's definitely moved in the pastoral direction, and I've really enjoyed that, honestly, here on campus. It's a lot. There's 90 some residential kids, and this year I think, there's 92 residential kids, and then there's like 150 or 160 kids total. So when you add then the external kids, the kids that commute every day.
And then like 80 elementary kids.
And 80 elementary kids. And then we have a staff, between 30 and 40. And so there's a lot of folks on campus, and it's great to get to invest in their lives, those that live here, those that commute every day. This year, something new. Well, actually, we started it last year. We have a farm. El Sembrador is, when you drive on campus, you're actually going to think it is just a farm because the farming operation's huge. Campus, the actual buildings and school are kind of in the middle of the property, and we're surrounded by our farm. And it's a dairy and a hog operation. And we started weekly devotionals with just the farm workers for just something for them and their spouses. A lot of them live here on campus with their children. So we meet on Tuesdays with those that work in the farm mechanic area. And then on Thursdays, we meet with those that work in the dairy and then the field workers. And so we have devotionals with them. We share with them just the word of the Lord. A lot of them are still early on in their faith. And so it's really fun to be able to minister to them, just like the students. With the students, we have our Sunday morning service and Sunday school. Then Wednesday mornings, we do a devotional service with absolutely everybody, students, staff, everybody's in the chapel together that morning on Wednesday mornings. And then we have every night before the kids go to bed, all 7 days of the week, we have a half-hour prayer time with the students on the soccer slab in front of their dorm building. And that's really informal, but the point of that was to they used to do prayer with the students in their dorm rooms every night back when we had a Bible Institute on campus, and the Bible Institute students would be able to help the pastor and go into every room and pray with every group. But since then the Institute is closed, and so we don't have that opportunity. So now we just meet with all of them together on the soccer slab, and it's a time for them to, they don't have to come dressed up. They can just come and relax before they go and clean their rooms before bed. And it's a time for them to share their prayer requests. They all know what prayer looks like. They've heard their parents pray their whole lives. You'd be hard pressed to find a village in Honduras that doesn't have a church in it. And so they all have seen prayer before, but it's unusual for them to be able to give a prayer request. And we teach them what that's like for them to give prayer requests themselves. We'll give them a few ideas for them to pray about in their rooms, really trying to get them to pray during their private time. That's a big part of what we do. And then I also teach as well. I don't teach full time like Ashley does. She teaches every day from 7 to 1:30, more or less, with her elementary students. And then I teach kind of hodgepodge. I teach philosophy to some of the high schoolers. So that's only a few hours a week. And then I teach Bible classes to all the grades. I think all of that all together, each day I might teach three hours or so each day. So I'm only there about half time teaching. But then when I'm not at the school, I'm in my office preparing messages or whatever I've got to do. But then something new this year was we had a church. Actually, it was the beginning of last year. We had a church. The church we met through, the church in Minnesota, the Ashley's church where we met. They sent an offering for us to put together school supply packets for our students when the school year started. A lot of our students have a lot of need. There's a lot of economic need amongst our student population. So often school supplies and basics are kind of hard for them to get a hold of. So this church provided the funds for us to do packets for our kids. But then when we did that, we passed out the packets at the beginning of the year. But then a few weeks later, when they started needing new pencil or their notebook was getting full or whatever, they kept coming to our house and, is there any leftovers? And so we thought, we can give them some more. And that became a thing. And we realized that we needed to find a way to be able to help the kids that have the highest need get a hold of those supplies that they needed when their parents weren't able to send it in. So we started with a wooden shelf in our house, and the kids would come up and we do their printing and their copying as well on our home printer. That started to not work real quick with a lot of kids using the printer. So we had a family from Indiana who gave us a larger printer copier, and we still do all of that for them. But the way that we cover the cost of the ink and the paper, and then with the school supplies that we hand out, now we give out not just school supplies, but personal hygiene items, deodorant, toothpaste, shampoo, all that stuff that they don't have. we give them an option. We have a little room here in the office building that the administration gave us. And we've got this room, it opens up to the outside. Every night, our little store, we call it La Misión, or the mission. That's what the kids call it. They come up to it and they have the choice. There's a little snack shack in there. We opened like a little, here they call them pulperias, but it's like a little mom and pop shop where you can come and get, chips and Coke and all that stuff. So the kids who have a little extra come in and they buy from that side in the evening. And then everything that store earns buys the school supplies that we give away to the kids who don't have the opportunity. And then we found that a lot of the kids who are older, they don't often want a lot of handouts. They want to be able to earn their things. And so we gave them the option. We can either give you the school supplies or you can pay cost for it. And so some of the kids choose to buy their stuff. But it's a way for them to have access to it on campus. And then we do their copying and printing there. The staff supports us in that. They come and do their printing, and they come and buy from the store. And we only open for an hour at night because El Sembrador does actually have a campus store that opens during the day. But we have that open for them in the evenings, and the kids, it's a fun way for them to support themselves. And so that's what they do. That's what we started. We do that each day, 7 days a week. Well, except Tuesdays. That's our day off. We take Tuesdays off. So Tuesdays we don't open, but every 6 days a week we're open. And I guess that's kind of the gist. I think I hit everything.
Now that we're not able to do our normal routine, Ethan's still been keeping up somewhat with the different devotionals and things too.
Yeah, we are able to do, El Sembrador has a Facebook page. We have our own ministry Facebook page people can find us on, but then El Sembrador has one as well. And they do we do our Wednesday morning devotionals. We're still doing those live on Facebook. We put them on every day, every Wednesday. I do the same service twice, the first one in English, the second one in Spanish. But the first one's at, I think they usually post it at 10:30, and then the Spanish version at 11.
Central time.
Yeah, Central time, Honduras time. So Eastern time, you guys are 2 hours ahead of us right now. Here it's only 10 to 10. But that's when we usually do those. And then we still do the farm employee work, even though our students aren't here. We communicate with our students all day. A lot of them, we mentioned, come from more high need situations. Some of them come from they come from difficult home situations, some of them, which people can understand. And so some of them, it's kind of hard to be home. And so right now we message with students all day. They all have Facebook. Most of them have Facebook. They all have ways, everybody's got a cell phone. It's basically the way to get in touch with people here. There's no mailing addresses in Honduras. Really the way to contact people is by phone. So everyone's got a phone, and so they can they get Facebook and they chat with us or WhatsApp, and all day our phones buzz, just constant messaging. But that's ministry right now. It's the way it looks right now with them not being here. And honestly, what we've been thankful for during this time of the virus has been some of our students who maybe have been less interested in coming to know the Lord as their personal savior, or who did not grow up in a Christian background, or who maybe have not had as much access to the word of the Lord. This process has made them consider that more. And they've been asking really good questions on messaging and calling and video calling and everything else. They ask a lot of good questions. And I think when we get back, we'll have a lot of work to do when the kids get back. But yeah, something to pray about there. I'll just add that one prayer request with the spiritual life side is that right as they were leaving, I was putting together a group of students who were interested in being baptized. And that was something that was pretty disappointing for a lot of them when they had to go home kind of last minute. They learned from one day to the next they were going home. And so did we. And so the baptism didn't happen. It was going to happen a couple weeks ago. And we had a group. It was quite a group of them that were ready, really, and they were ready for that. And so we had not had a baptism on campus for several years. Up until last year, we baptized 10 kids in the river here on campus. And this year we were going to grow in that group, start those kids that were baptized in discipleship classes or some, a special class for them, and then baptize another group this year that was ready to go. So
that's fantastic, guys. One of the things for those of you listening and watching, I just have to say this, like I haven't had the opportunity to get to know Ashley as much as I have Ethan, but I just know that she is right there with him. One of the things that I absolutely love about this couple is that it is evident that they love people. Honestly, Ethan, when you were saying about getting your ordination because you feel like pastoral is just like, I'm like, yeah, over here cheering, like, yeah, I totally see that. Like, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. Thank you guys for all that you do, for loving on the people in Honduras. And honestly, I'm just like, I'm blessed to be able to even have this conversation with you and to be able to hear your stories and testimonies of how you do love people. And so that's just beautiful to me. Also, for those of you that are watching, I did go ahead and include both Facebook pages that they just mentioned. So you'll have I won't say it right.
Yeah, okay. El
Say it for me.
Sembrador.
El Sembrador. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Ethan and Ashley's Honduras page on Facebook as well. So if you would like, and actually I'm going to strongly encourage you, click on both those links and like those pages so that you'll be able to kind of constantly see what they are doing. And as you are scrolling through Facebook, it's just a great reminder to say, hey, I need to stop and take a minute and pray for Ethan and Ashley. And so I would just really strongly encourage you to get online and like both of those pages. Okay, so with that, let me just ask this question, just for fun. All right. Do you have a funny story that has happened to you as a missionary, or something while you've been down in Honduras?
A funny story.
If not, that's okay.
No, there's got to be something. I mean, I'm thinking of one, but I'm not sure. It was pretty embarrassing. I don't know.
Then that's the one you got to share, man.
It was very early on when I was here. We hadn't met yet, and I was here. I lived for the first couple of years cumulatively with a host family, with a Honduran family that still very dear to me. People that taught me Spanish. I studied Spanish in school, but honestly, in college, but I don't think I learned more in the 2 years I lived with this actual, Honduran couple than I did in college. But I know that that couple, he was in the military. He's retired now. He was in the Honduran military. And so they were very well connected in that way. And so I remember one time my host mother at the time did not have a driver's license. And hopefully she doesn't see this, and maybe I'll get in trouble, but she didn't understand English, so we should be okay. So I know we went, and we were pretty close friends, the whole family, just all of us. And one day he was gone working. My host father was gone working, and she needed a ride to this function for military wives. And it was supposed to be a pretty formal thing. And she told me that it was the next day. She needed me to drive her there. She'd tell me where to go and everything. But she said it was a formal deal, but she said it was at 7 a.m. And I remember thinking, boy, that's strange for usually like a formal military events at night or whatever. I said, all right, I'll drive you wherever. So we got up early, and it was a ways away. So we had to get up really early, and we got ready, and then we left, and I was taking her to this event. I wasn't going to stay. I was going to stick around in the car, or I don't know what I was going to do while she was in this event, but she was going to go in and be a part of that. So we drive to this military base and to this function. We park. She's like, dressed up real fancy and formal and like in heels and all this. And she's walking in and getting ready for this big function. Well, we walk into the room, we walk into the building, and we ask about this function. No one seems to know what we're talking about. And then we walk into this auditorium. There's probably at least 200 Honduran soldiers being briefed or something, because there were some officers or something up on the stage. And they stopped the meeting because we opened the doors. They stopped the meeting, and everyone turned around and looked at us and asked what was going on, what we needed. And the thing was 7 at night, not 7 in the morning. So we walked into this function, and all these guys is just hugely embarrassing. I don't think I'd ever been more red in my life. I was standing there in shorts and a t-shirt and my flip-flops, and she's like going to a ball. And so we're standing there in front of these hundreds of Honduran soldiers, and they're all in their fatigues, and they're all sitting there looking at us like, what in the world are we doing here in this? But anyway, that was a terrible experience. I don't think I ever went back to that base again. So that was probably one of the worst things that's happened.
All right.
I think can I tell one more or no?
Yeah, go for it.
A funny one or a spooky one? What was the first scary thing that happened to me? I don't remember if I shared this at camp or not. I worked in a neighborhood in Tegucigalpa when I was first down here. It's kind of a rougher neighborhood in the city, for sure. But one day, my host family lent me their very nice vehicle to go to the mall and get myself a burger. I wanted a burger, and so I went to drive, because at home they don't eat a lot of American style food, and so I wanted to go get a burger. There's McDonald's at the mall. So I was going to drive to McDonald's, and they lent me their nice vehicle. And I thought on the way I'd stop in the neighborhood I usually work in and drop something off for a family. And I remember driving into that neighborhood with this totally naive, with this super fancy vehicle into this really not great place. And I came to love that neighborhood like a second home. So this was very early on before I knew many people there. And I remember driving in, and I drove into what they call a cuneta, which is a gigantic drain funneling thing in the road. Like it's like usually about 2 feet, maybe a foot and a half, 2 feet deep, and about a foot wide. It's these channels that run through the road that haul rainwater down the hill. And I drove into it, and I couldn't get out of it. And several of these people that weren't always so friendly came up to the car and started talking to me. And I was really nervous. I was nervous I was going to lose the car. But one of the ways the Lord showed me that I was home, or I was in the ministry, in the place where I was supposed to minister, was through those guys. That day, a lot of these guys in this group I ended up getting to know as good friends. But they instead of making my fears come true, I was very foolish to think so lowly about what was going to happen. But they actually jumped on my bumper in the back and in the front and helped lift it out and help me get the car out. And I went and parked the car, and I went to the nearest like pulperia, the little shops there, and I bought all the pop they had, and I took it down to them, and probably had one of the best conversations I've ever had in ministry, just from having driven this fancy car into a drain in a neighborhood I should not have been in. And I was there for 3 or 4 hours just chatting with them about Christ and just talking about their lives and everything. And that was when I really felt, I think that was the same day or very, very soon after is when I reapplied to come back the next year. Anyway, that was a scary situation and a funny situation. So
that's awesome. All right, guys, let me shift gears real quick. But before I do, let me just remind everybody that's watching, if you have a question you want to ask Ethan and Ashley, you can put it in the comments on the Facebook Live, or you can send it to Brett at MountHopeBibleCamp.com. But I want to kind of shift gears because at Mount Hope, you all know, our very last session with you as missionary speakers, as with any missionary speaker, is we kind of encourage our Mount Hope family to engage with what you are doing on the field. And so that's kind of where I want to shift gears a little bit. And let me just ask this: what's a few ways that Mount Hope could connect with what you're doing in Honduras? I'll just kind of leave it open like that, and then you can share, and then maybe I'll follow up.
Mm-hmm. Well, keeping in contact with us, I mean, honestly, one of the most encouraging things that we can get from folks are messages on Facebook or email. And actually, I wanted to give a little shout out to Mount Hope for that. When I was first there in 2014, I went as the missionary for 1 week, but then I stayed a couple more weeks. By the way, the ministry at Mount Hope, I mean, we've been a part of camps all over the country and we love them all, but there's something special there at Mount Hope for sure. The ministry, seeing what happens there is incredible. And made me stay a couple more weeks just as a volunteer working. And I was a cabin leader in Solomon's Porch that year. And I still remember the names of a lot of my campers, and a couple of them still reach out to me on Facebook, even this year, greeting each other and chatting. And, 6 years later, still keeping in contact with some of them. And that's been really special. So when people are able to do that, we really appreciate the encouragement, and just words of just a greeting from home is quite nice. Even during these COVID-19 times when the government here is actually has been a lot stricter than even in the US. We're grateful for that. The healthcare system here isn't as strong as other places. And so if there were to be a massive outbreak, it would be probably pretty rough. And so they have it shut down pretty completely. We're only allowed, we only can go out one day every 2 weeks based on our ID numbers to do our shopping and stuff. Otherwise, we're just here on campus. And so hearing from people back home is really encouraging, especially right now. Other ways, like I was sharing earlier, we know that there's lots of folks in the Mount Hope area that have supported us in the past, and we appreciate that, but prayer support as well. One of the things that's been new that we would encourage people with in your area is we were telling you about the store, the little room that we have where we get school supplies and some basic clothing items and personal hygiene items that we give to our neediest students. And a lot of those items, not all of them, about 60% of them we are able to acquire here, but the other 40% are donated by people in the US. And that helps a lot to keep that particular ministry afloat financially. We don't have to purchase those items. And a lot of times, even in your youth group, there'll be a youth group leader that will say, hey, for a month, everyone bring a stick of deodorant to donate to youth group meeting, just one stick or a bucket or a tube of toothpaste or something. And They collect it in a box, and what they'll do is they'll ship it to either my parents' house or Ashley's parents' house, and then we figure out a way to get it down here. This last year, we did that for the first time and got a huge response. We were home last Christmas. Ashley's sister was married, and we went home. Our parents blessed us with that gift of being able to go home and be a part of that wedding. And when we were there, we had asked for these donations ahead of time, several months ahead of time, and we figured we'd get some response, but we didn't know how much. And we got to my parents' house and went up to our room, just full of boxes of colored pencils, crayons, socks, t-shirts, deodorant, all that stuff, just suitcases people had shipped, just tons of stuff. And
we didn't have a way to get it all down right away. We've had to slowly bring it down in smaller shipments.
We've had to have people who are willing and generous enough to haul a second suitcase down for us, bring that. And so that's a huge thing. So if anyone's interested in doing that, that's a huge way to be involved. It means a lot to those kids. To us, maybe in the US, $1 for a tube of toothpaste or $2 or whatever might not seem like a huge deal, but that's it's often not as easy for them to get a hold of things like that. And so we want to we help the ones that don't have options do that. Just like our other students, we have some students on campus who have come from backgrounds where they have a little more. And so then they actually donate too, and they give to their friends and they contribute to the project. So, it's not just people in the US, it's people here. And that'd be a big way. And any of you that are teachers, if there are teachers out there that work with little kids or whatever age kids, if you can think of anything that Ashley might be able to use in her classroom, we can also get that down here one way or another. Books, we've been our goal with the elementary school is to open a little library. Libraries are really not common here. It's very rare for a school to have a library. Actually, there's pretty much nothing like that. And so we want to have one here at our elementary school. And we've started talking to people about collecting kids' books in English or Spanish, because our elementary school is bilingual. Ashley teaches half in Spanish, half in English during the day, even to her preschoolers, and they can read either language. We like a good mix of both. And so we were trying to build that library. If you have any kids' books, things like that. So
that would be, I think we'll probably try to join you in some fashion on that for sure. I can just imagine my wife just eating that up and wanting to start collecting books. So we'll be in contact on that for sure. For those of you watching, I did put Ethan and Ashley's link to their giving page on WGM's site. I would just encourage you to consider jumping on board and supporting them as well in their missionary work in Honduras. Guys, let me just finish up with one last question, and I think you kind of already hinted at it, but then we'll kind of wrap up after this. But how? Did you see the comment, guys? Sarah, my wife just said I could stock a whole library, and that's good. Probably true. That's probably true. It would help me clean some things out too. So that's fantastic.
That would be great.
All right. So here's the last question I'll ask. How could we be praying for you guys right now?
Well, as we've sort of said before, this whole, obviously with everyone, the whole situation with the virus and the quarantine is difficult. And I don't know if we mentioned this before or not, but here in Honduras, the school year is different than in the States. We start in February and we end in November. And so the kids only had about a month and a half or so of classes before we had to stop for this time of quarantine. And right now the government's trying to figure out what to do with the rest of the school year. We're doing some online classes, as we said, and sending activities home with the kids and stuff, but we're not really sure what the rest of the year here might look like. And that's hard for kids who already have a lot of instability in their lives, to also not know if they'll be able to come back to school here or not this year, and especially for our seniors who are planning on starting college the next year or jobs, and now they might have to wait one whole more year for that, and it's hard on their families when they were counting on the income from that particular student. Now they might have to study another year or just drop out, and so that's one thing that I can think of.
Yeah, we're really waiting. It's kind of, nervously, but not nervous, just leaving it in the Lord's hands. We don't know what the rest of the school year will look like. Finding a way that if the school year were to be canceled for the rest of the year, figuring out, it's a ministry. Everything's faith-based here at El Sembrador. And so if there's if donations decrease, how do we keep teachers on staff during a time when there's no students? I know a lot of teachers are worried about their jobs. We reassured them. Right now, we're still going. Like Ashley was saying, we're doing the online classes. But here in Honduras, a lot of our students are from mountainous regions. They don't have access to internet. We're only getting about a 40% connection rate with them right now, the ones that are connecting online. I know some days, Ashley, she has 19 preschoolers in her classroom, and usually, but she has been having between 6 and like
Between
9,
6 and
6 and
10 or
10,
so.
6 and 10 kids connect every day. But it's hard figuring out, putting their education on hold. That's our biggest concern right now, to pray for that. Prayer, other than that, praying, well, we've started here in our house, in one of our guest rooms. El Sembrador is blessed. We've got a lot of great, our living situation is actually great. There's houses on campus, and we live in a house that's way too big for the two of us. So we're blessed that way. But one of our guest rooms has turned into our food storage room. We have had people provide us with what we can so we can buy food. We put that together in food provisions for folks in the area, the next door village, people who we know that are having a harder time. There's no such thing as like, if you lose your job here, there's no government help, there's no options. And so you're pretty much just on your own, and there's no income
And
then.
a lot of people have lost their jobs right now. The only things that are allowed to be open are grocery stores. And it's not like in the States where it's a Walmart and a Target that also sells clothes and things. It's just groceries. And lots of people just work as day laborers on the side of the road selling things, and they can't do that now. And so it's really hard for them.
Yeah, there's been a really high loss of jobs here. I mean, there is in the States too, but that's been something we've thought about. Our students at home, and this is for all the year, this isn't just for now with COVID-19, El Sembrador becomes like their second home. A lot of them miss being here, especially right now. So a lot of them, that they would have peace. A lot of them are struggling to find peace right now. Not all of them, but some of them. And it's, pray for them in their homes. That then when they would come back, they'd, that the things would, if we'd open up this year or next year, that we'd be able to return at some point, and they'd be able to feel like they're home again at El Sembrador. So pray for them to have peace in their houses and with their educations, that, we don't want to see that because of this, some kids stop studying or whatever because they needed to keep working to help their family, which could be the case. We want to pray that they'll keep studying, that they'll come back and keep going to graduate, doing things like that. I think specific to the virus, they announced at the beginning of this thing, there were articles in the national newspapers and stuff like that talking about how in the whole country of Honduras, there's less than 150 ventilators and all this stuff. And we talked to a doctor friend of ours who lives in town near us, and she's actually another missionary from the US, not with WGM, but she was saying she works in her office. It's still open even during this time. She's a doctor. She's got a private clinic, and she was saying that, it's a concern if the outbreak gets really, really huge. The medical infrastructure here is not great. And so that it'd be hard to contain. Right now, I think in the whole country, we just hit 2,100 cases or something like that total. But in a country of 9 million, that seems like a small percentage, but it's still, if it gets to the point where it spreads everywhere, we don't have as many means to stop it. So that's why they've locked the whole thing down. There's no traveling from city to city. Most things are just shut down. And so praying for that. I suppose too, after all this, we've been thinking about how will we as a couple, as a missionary couple, pastoral couple here on campus, when they come back to campus, how exactly do we interact? We want them to have a positive attitude, but how do we do that sensitively? Some of them, we just need to be able to help them handle whatever they went through at home. And things when they come back to campus. Spiritually, we really hope that group of kids that was hoping to be baptized this year, that they'll still feel that when they come back. We were really excited this year because it wasn't just students. We had a couple of adults amongst the farm employees that were also going to be baptized during that service. That's a great example to other adults on our campus, and then to the kids as well. And so we're praying that spiritual, that fire for the Lord won't be shut off during this time, especially if they're from a home that won't, that doesn't go to church or things like that. We don't want them to fall backwards. We want them to keep going forward. So that's another prayer request.
All right, guys. Hey, thank you so much. Mount Hope family, I think we can all agree that we'll be praying for Ethan and Ashley, and appreciate you guys so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the Facebook Live here in just a second. But again, on Thursday, we'll be sitting down with, Nathaniel and Nicole Summers, Texas-Mexico border with WGM. And then you can always catch any of the interviews on our app, website, or YouTube channel as well at a later time. So I just wanted to let you know that. And again, Ethan and Ashley, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
And then
We appreciate
go
it.
ahead and stop the live stream.